All right, you stay there. I'm gonna turn the light off, okay? You ready? Ha ha! I finally got a light, but there's a problem here. I don't know if you can tell, but it is lighting up my apartment like a freaking battlefield. All right, so now that I'm a bit more situated and I dropped the intensity of the light down to 10%, the discovery I just pointed out to you, which you can still sort of see in the background here, led me to the title of this video about lighting a small space and what the best technique for me that I found to light my space ended up being. So I figured I'd give that a shot and see how it comes out. Upon turning the light on, the instant feeling that I had was, this is not making me look anything like these other YouTubers in these videos. What am I doing wrong? And also, why the hell is my entire apartment being lit like... So my first instinct was to just pack the whole thing up and return it and just figure out some other solution. But as I sat with the light for a little bit, I started to figure out just what might be the problem. Now, before we get into it, I'm just putting it out there that I am by no means an expert. I think it's been proven up until now that I am not an expert. I'm just going based off of my sort of initial experiences, my instinctual feeling with all the things that I've been doing. And so what I'm saying about the lights that I'm about to demonstrate is purely my own experience in my particular scenario for my environment. But I do think that a significant number of people will be able to benefit from some of the insights I may have come across during this process. And in the spirit of getting better at lighting, so here we have light A. Now on to light B. Light A is where all of the seeming to be problems started to arise. You might notice this as well, but the first thing I felt was this, sure, it's a daylight, it's 5600 Kelvin as it's supposed to be, but it totally doesn't look natural. It certainly doesn't look natural the way it does in these other videos. So what's going on? I noticed that there's a contrast, but not in the good way. There's sort of a clashing of lights here. And that's basically because of the environment that I'm in. I have I always forget the name. Practical lighting. I have my practical lights behind me, and they are clearly more tungsten-y. I was about to say warmer. And then you've got this 5600K light beaming down on me. What I realized was this light looks way too daylight-y compared to the tungsten behind me, so I figured I would adjust the white balance. And this is where the problem comes, because when you have this white balance, to get this light to look normal, what's it going to do to the background? I'll show you. I'm pretty sure, especially in post, when I correct these colors, the back's going to become really tungsten-y, just to get this light to look more natural. So I decided the perfect thing to do would be to adjust the Kelvin. Light A is the Godox VL150 with a 35-inch parabolic softbox and a grid modifier on it. So at this point, I figured, great, one of the benefits of having the Godox light is the fact that I can adjust the Kelvin. So that's what I decided to do. Now looking at this, can you tell me how to change the Kelvin? Problem number one, there's no control on this box to change the Kelvin. Fortunately, it comes with, on this remote, you can change the Kelvin. Now pay attention here, because this is where things get interesting. The Kelvin is going down, but it doesn't affect the Kelvin on the light. The first thing I'm gonna think if I see a Kelvin there, even if nobody says anything about it, is the Kelvin must be adjustable. It's not adjustable. But the worst part is you can actually change the number and it doesn't do anything to the light. What it does do, though, is one of the benefits of this light is the fact that you can linearly drop it all the way down to 1%, 0% to turn it off, but illuminated down to 1% all the way up to 100%. Now, before we get into all of this, let me mention some of the positives of this light. Number one, it has a Bowens mount, so you can fit anything that uses a Bowens mount to the light. You can get various size softboxes just like you can with the Aputure, and the Aputure being its main competitor, the 120D. With the controller box, you have a linear control with the wheel, and it can go all the way down to 1%, all the way up to 100%. Fantastic. The kicker with all of this is all in, the Aputure with a light dome, 35 inches roughly, comes out to about $1,000. The Godox VL150 with a LAOFAS 35-inch softbox comes out to $500. Now, I've never used an Aputure 120D, so I can't speak to how that works. But based on what I see in videos and based on what other people have said, this thing pretty much compares to that. This is one of the first lights that's come out where the price is significantly lower and it actually delivers 90, 95, 99% of the functionality that you would get with the Aputure. Now, both the app and the controller can control the Kelvin number. Big whoop, because it doesn't control the light, as we just saw. What you did notice, though, is the light got brighter when I changed the Kelvin. Because here's the problem. The box can bring the light down to 1%, but the remote and the app can't bring the light down beyond 10%. I have to get up and change it down to 1% if I need to with the box. Not the biggest deal. Except when I sit back down to try and use the controller or the app, as soon as I touch anything, it'll immediately bump the light back up to 10% because it doesn't recognize anything lower than 10%. In this scenario, I was already at 10%, but for some reason, when I bumped the Kelvin up, I went up to 3400 Kelvin, and it just jumped to 25%. So there we have light A, the Godox VL150. So here's light B. Maybe some subtle differences, but overall, sort of getting the same effect. Now, I'm still at the same white balance of 5600 on my camera, but I want you to pay attention to any differences you might see. Now, this light is the FalconEyes SO-28TD. I'm going to start with the bad parts. Number one, the light hitting my face is a little bit harsher. The spots on my face, the hard spots on my face of the light are a little bit more significant. And that comes from the fact that the light, as it's called an SO-28TD, is a 28-inch diameter light. Because of the fact that it's a smaller light, it's going to end up creating a harsher light. As the light gets bigger and wider, especially when you have a bigger diffuser, the light softens up and it just dissipates a little bit better. This light's hitting me more directly. It has a smaller radius. The other negative to this light is the fact that it doesn't have a Bowens mount. It's built in with a diffuser, but it doesn't have a mount, and it also doesn't have modifiers made for it. Now that part I'm going to come back to in a little bit. But the thing that I want to point out right now is there's not really that significant of a difference. Now, if absolutely soft light is something you need and want, and these little spots that you're seeing are something that you cannot tolerate, then fine. But before you make your final decision, take those things that you don't like and hold them to the side. Maybe put in your mind how much value those negatives actually hold, and then let's see how significant that value actually is. Now, what's the positive about this light? Did you notice anything different? You can control the percentage, but also FalconEyes did this really weird thing where they put the Kelvin on the back that you can change, and the light actually changes with it. Now, I have this set to 3200 Kelvin right now, and maybe it might look a little bit too warm. The lights behind me are between 22 and 2700 Kelvin. And here's where the bigger difference comes in. Looks a bit different, right? The light hitting my face now looks a lot closer to daylight, and the lights in the back also are still more tungsteny than the light hitting my face. I have the camera now set to a white balance of 3800 Kelvin. And here's the first major benefit of this light, and what led me to start learning more about white balance. One of the things that I realized that's so significantly problematic with daylight, not the Godox or the Aputure, because even the FalconEyes, when I had it at 5600 Kelvin when I started this clip, there's that contrast, right? You have a daylight hitting you in a room that's filled with tungsten light. But in terms of contextualizing the light, for me, the context here is my apartment with 22 to 2700 Kelvin for my practical lighting, so having a daylight is completely out of place. In those situations, having a light where you can control the Kelvin makes all the difference in the world. Just like this fill light that I'm using here is roughly about 27 to 3000 Kelvin, so that when it's hitting the side of me here, as you can see when I turn it away, it makes it feel like my ambient lighting is providing me with some level of fill. And so to maintain the context of the room, having a key light where I can adjust the Kelvin, that makes all the difference in the world. It allows me to contextualize my lighting way more. It allows things to look way more natural. And when you use that in conjunction with your white balance, you can tailor it to exactly the way you want. And if you're in a situation where this makes sense to you, then this might be the light that you'd want to get. But there are still other things to consider. Some good, some not so good. Now, we already talked about the fact that the light is diametrically smaller, so it's going to hit you a little bit more sharply and it's going to make the shadows harder and all this stuff. I did mention that I was going to come back to the fact that it doesn't have a Bones mount and it doesn't have any modifiers, but I just placed a modifier on the light. It's hanging there. I mean, it's doing what it needs to do. It isn't the most elegant thing in the world, but if you really needed a modifier, if you really needed a grid for it, you could just throw a grid on top of it. But there's another thing too. Let's even take the grid off. Without the grid, it still lights the back of my apartment, but not nearly as much as the Godox did. As I mentioned, the Godox VL150 is the first significant contender to the Aputure 120D at half the price. So it's a no-brainer. If you're looking at an Aputure 120D and there isn't anything specific about the Aputure that you absolutely need, then I really can't see why you would go for that over the Godox. You're going to save $500. Now, I mentioned earlier to take the things that you may not like about the FalconEyes that I'm mentioning and package them to one side. When you look at the comparison, and then you consider the fact that the FalconEyes is $155, now take a look at the gripes and see if those gripes are worth more than $350. But here's the thing, it's not just $350, because if the FalconEyes can do a majority of what the Godox can do, and the Godox is almost identical to the Aputure, that means the FalconEyes is also comparable to the Aputure. But in a small space, especially now that I'm not lighting up my entire apartment, and it can change the Kelvin and I can utilize my white balance in a way that I want to. If you're in a situation that matches mine, if you need something that you can have a little bit more control over, if you're on a tight budget but you want to start doing something with lighting, to me, I think the FalconEyes nails it. And so that's going to be the one that I'm going to keep. But anyway, let me know if you got any value out of this. Let me know if you are pleased with my upgrade in lighting, because I'm sure it's better than not having had a light. But I think that's it for this video. It probably went longer than I wanted it to. Hit the like button if you got value out of it. If you want to stick around to find out about the next video and the other videos I'm going to make, hit the subscribe button. Definitely comment below. I love reading them. I have just been amazed at the comments that I've been getting so far. And I do my best, at least right now while I'm small, to respond back to everybody and be part of the community. I'm super grateful. So I hope that this lived up to that standard, and I'll see you guys in the next video.